From trying to make an epic comeback after the first winless season of his career to refusing to race in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, it seems like Lewis Hamilton might not stick around for as long as we thought. In fact, here's why he didn't even want to race in Saudi Arabia, although that probably has more to do with the fact that the country hasn't really improved on its human rights issue rather than the fact that Hamilton's clearly been struggling with his car. I mean, have we already forgotten about what happened last year? Basically, right before the last Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the Formula One teams had to witness a missile strike on an oil refinery, and drivers were just sitting there until 2 in the morning to decide if they even wanted to race anymore. But of course, there was huge pressure coming in from Saudi sponsors and authorities to make them race. So even if they didn't want to go out there because it wasn't safe, they had to bow down. And fast forward to 2023, and a bunch of drivers think it's a lot safer now, like Stroll or Ocon, who seem to really trust the safety measures in place. But Hamilton doesn't think so. And even though he didn't want to race in Jeddah, he didn't have a choice because Formula One was going to continue with or without him. Having said that, he also feels the sport has the responsibility to raise awareness regarding human rights issues and leave a positive impact. If anything, it needs to do a lot more than it is right now. And while I'm at it, don't forget that there hasn't really been a massive improvement in the country's current state.
I mean, in 2009, Formula One really entered the hybrid era. We kind of were at the pinnacle of developing that technology, which is now in road cars today. The more and more we evolve those fluids, then push in that direction, particularly for sustainability. And it's quite cool to see that so many areas that we are working on are now starting to affect people's day-to-day lives.
In fact, there had been at least 13 executions in the 2 weeks prior to the Grand Prix. At least that's what Reprieve's joint executive director, Maya Foa, had to say. On top of that, she also claimed that the country was using the Jeddah Grand Prix as a distraction from all the bloodshed. Meanwhile, commercial partners had taken a vow of silence, and that put drivers in an uncomfortable and unsafe position since some of them didn't even want to race in Saudi Arabia in the first place. Not only that, but in 2022, Saudi Arabia executed 81 men in one day for terrorism and other offenses like holding deviant beliefs, and this was one of the biggest mass execution in decades. Plus, this is an accelerating pattern considering the 67 executions reported in 2021 and the 27 in 2020. Having said that, sports washing is one of the common attempts to hide their reputation through sport, and while Hamilton has been pretty vocal about his disagreement regarding the entire situation, I don't think he expected a response from the country that quick. Well, the Saudi Arabian government embraced his push for positive change in the Middle East. It turns out that the SMC chairman and Prince Khalid bin Sultan Al Abdullah Al Faisal welcomed his advocacy for human rights. In fact, he said that the government wants everyone to speak their mind and be vocal about their opinions. And that's exactly why they aren't going to come in the way of Hamilton's advocacy. If anything, it's his right and they support it. As for the safety measures, they've already talked about it in as much detail as they wanted to before the race. So, all they've said for now is that they support Hamilton's right to free speech. But is that really enough? Because while Formula One isn't a part of these crimes or attacks, many people believe that its silence is enough to legitimize them instead. For starters, the brother of a man executed by the Saudi Arabian authorities last year accused F1 to be complicit in these crimes. And while the country seems to be using F1 to sports wash the oppressive attacks, it seems like the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix comes off as acceptance too. That's exactly what Hamilton is trying to point out as well. Speaking of which, even though he was under immense pressure to race in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, it was still pretty miserable. The 7-time champion continued to struggle with his car. After qualifying 8th for the race and 4 places behind his teammate George Russell, Hamilton was left pretty disappointed.
Where did you get the courage to speak up about you being the only one in the room? Where did you get that courage from?
I think partly it's ingrained in who I am. I've never been really good at adhering to kind of rules.
In fact, he described it as a lack of connection with the team, where after a disappointing start to the 2023 season in Bahrain, he still couldn't make up for it in the next race. Not only that, but despite his concerns, the team wasn't ready to listen to him for the development of the car. And so, despite giving the team everything he's got, he's finding it tough to stay afloat, which is why he doesn't feel any connection to the car either. In his words, "I don't really know what I am going to do about that." Meanwhile, George seems to be making the best out of whatever he's got while Hamilton continues to struggle. But the team in itself still can't compete with Red Bull, who seems to be at the top right now. And that's got the team boss, Toto Wolff, thinking about the future prospects of his driver, specifically the 7-time world champion. He says he wouldn't have any complaints if Hamilton decides to switch to another team. Considering how everything turned out over the past season, you probably saw it coming. While 2022 was the first winless season of his career, it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to compete with Max Verstappen for the title this year either. Right now, not only is Mercedes behind Red Bull, but the team has also fallen behind Ferrari and Aston Martin. And until he scores a record-breaking 8th World Championship title, Hamilton's going to be tied with Michael Schumacher on the wins. Having said that, if he wants to break the record, he needs to make sure he has the right car, and clearly he can't get that at Mercedes. While Wolff doesn't think switching teams is a priority on the Brit's mind, he wouldn't complain if it comes down to this in the next 1 or 2 years. But if you ask me, I think it's going to happen sooner than you think. Let's not forget that his contract is going to be up by the end of this year. Rewind to 2022, right after Daniel Ricciardo was covering from the McLaren Axe, Mercedes swooped in with a reserve driver offer for the Aussie for 2023. And rumor has it, the team was planning to have him replace the 7-time champion once his contract was up.
I think for all of us, we always miss driving, so the break initially feels too short, and then when you get towards the end of it, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, get back into the action. So, but I definitely maximized and enjoyed it.
Excellent. Good to hear.
Great to hear, yeah.
This only meant one thing. Hamilton was going to retire without his record-breaking title. But as soon as the rumor made headlines, he confirmed that he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, Wolff and Hamilton were negotiating a multi-year contract over the summer break. But even until the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, they didn't announce any updates over the official deal. And that got fans thinking maybe he's planning to retire with a win. That definitely would be something I'd expect the 7-time champion to do, but it doesn't seem like he's any closer to the title than he was in 2022, so I'm gonna ditch that possibility.
For sure, the most difficult thing is keeping your goal and your eyes set on that, and not being distracted, not giving up. I think the easiest thing in life is to give up on whatever you're focused on.
And with Wolff hinting at Hamilton's exit from the team, I'm gonna make a wild guess and say things haven't been working out so well for the Brit, even though he's at that stage of his career where he's formed a great bond with the team, and all fans want is for his return to solid performances. But it looks like we gotta wait and see how that turns out. Until then, this was the real reason why Hamilton didn't want to race in Saudi Arabia.